Trafficking Awareness Day webinar. As you can tell, my voice is not what it should be, but we will make it through the evening. I'm Michael Turner, President-elect of the Summerlin Rotary Club in Las Vegas. Just one housekeeping chore as a reminder that by participating in the Zoom webinar, you agree to having the Summerlin Rotary Club and District 5300 use your image for marketing and promotional purposes. There will be no compensation in perpetuity for use of your image. To read the full statement, go to our website, rotarysummerlin.org, and it will be under the club link tab. The webinar tonight will explore child sex trafficking in Southern Nevada and Southern California. The area stretches from Mesquite, Nevada to Pasadena, California. In fall 2021, the Summerlin Rotary Club will be launching the Child Sex Trafficking Awareness Campaign, Children Are Priceless. This will be a pilot program that will be used as a model for establishing a campaign across the entire District 5300. In 2018, over half of the criminal sex trafficking cases in the United States involve children. The Summerlin Rotary Club has been working diligently on this project since late July 2020. And during that time, we have dispelled three myths. First, that the majority of children who are sex trafficked are not from other cities, but from our local community. Most people are not aware of that. They think that most of the children come from out of the community, but they can be your neighborhood children. When you go to take your child to school, it can be any one of their classmates that could be involved in the child trafficking. Second, most brochures, websites, and other materials about child sex trafficking use misleading photos like this. They do generate raw emotion, but are not realistic portrayal of the children who are active in sex trafficking. These are the pictures of the children who are involved. They look just like your children, your neighbor's children, or anyone else's children. And they come from every community and every demographic. And finally, the consumers or Johns of child sex trafficking are not sex offenders, but respected lawyers, plumbers, teachers, retail clerks, religious leaders, entertainers, and many more who live and work in our community. And they come from our lower end or our higher end neighborhoods. And so they could be your neighbors, co-workers, friends, relatives, even high profile community and business leaders. And most have participated in multiple liaisons with these children. So tonight our speakers will educate us about child sex trafficking in Southern Nevada and Southern California and the detrimental effects this activity has on our community. Elin Green is manager of the Victim Services and Human Trafficking Division for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. She's been working in the field of victim services and advocacy for several decades. Elin began her career as a therapist specializing in chemical dependency, adolescent issues using creative arts and expressive therapies. She was trained in structural family therapy at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center.
Oh, here. Now
Elaine has earned
I think
certification.
unmuted. Oh, mute. Unmute. Oh, God.
Elaine has earned certification from the Peace Officer Standards and Training Program, and as part of her role at the Las Vegas Police Department, Elaine oversees the Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force. So, Elaine, you can unmute yourself now.
Thank you. I'm going to have you run the PowerPoint if you don't mind.
Okay.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me here. And I especially want to thank you for the work that you're all doing around child sex trafficking. And hopefully this will be the start of an ongoing conversation as we look at what trafficking really looks like and in terms of the vulnerabilities. We talk about our youth being vulnerable. Next slide, please. But the reality is that there are so many things that make a child vulnerable to human trafficking. It's not just child abuse or some of the things, but we do know that a large percentage of our homeless youth become victimized. And they often call it survival sex, or they see this as a way of surviving. They get a bed, they get 3 meals a day or 2 meals or 1 meal. And that in turn is how they survive. It is trafficking. Someone is exploiting them. Instead of giving them a safe place to sleep, they're expecting something in return or demanding something in return. So this is an old study from 2008. Those numbers have increased. And what we also know, anytime we put numbers out there, and tonight you're going to get to see our new numbers for 2020 that we just crunched this afternoon, which is why I couldn't get the PowerPoint to you any sooner. But anytime we look at numbers, we have to be really careful because we don't have a consistent mechanism for tracking. There is no local, state, regional, or national database. So we don't know what we're really looking at. So it's very important to know that anytime numbers are presented, it's only what we know. And I know that sounds very simple, but that is the reality, is that we don't know the big picture. Next slide, please. So in 2019, we identified 116 juvenile victims through the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. These were identified victims. Here's where it gets really important. We notice that there is a high percentage of African American or Black youth, 59%. And for some reason, this kind of morphed. It was not supposed to be 1.2%, but actually, we see that minorities are most vulnerable. And let's go to the next slide, which is the new one that just came out today. We have, well, this one is of those 116 victims, 82 had a history of running away. They were homeless at some point. 3 were 13 years or younger, and 102 of 116 were local to the Las Vegas Valley. So again, that just exactly supports what you said in your introduction. These are our children. Next slide. So these are the numbers for 2020. And again, we see a disproportionate number. Our African-American youth, 64%. Our Asian youth are only 4%. Our Hispanic youth, 19%, and only 13% of the identified juveniles are Caucasian. So what that lets us know is that we have to target certain communities to educate families better and to provide support to those youth who develop vulnerabilities for a lot of different reasons. And it's not always child abuse or neglect or things like that. So we have to be working in these communities where we see minority youth, since that seems to be our largest population. Next slide, please. Of the 106 victims identified in 2020, and remember, this was kind of a different year. We didn't have access to the hotels and casinos for a period of time due to COVID. So there were a lot of different techniques that we used, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we had 63 of those youth had a history of running away. 5 were 13 or younger, and 75 of those 106 were local to the Las Vegas Valley. Again, a large number of them are our children. They're not coming from other countries. They're not coming from across the country, although we do see some, as you saw in that earlier video. Next slide, please. We learn about what's happening in our community through research, through the Arizona State University Sex Trafficking Resource Unit. And what they do is they do a tremendous amount of research, and they are our partner here in Las Vegas, and they help us to understand the scope of what we're looking at. So this is a report. It is available. I can email it out if you don't already have it. But this is what the initial video that you saw was based on. That was sort of a summary of this child sex trafficking study that was coordinated over a period of several years to give us an idea of what we're looking at in our own community. Next slide, please. This is a video similar to that one. Hopefully it will run. Again, that comes directly from the study, and it gives you a visual picture. And again, as was mentioned earlier by Michael in the introduction, the children look just like our children, our nieces, our nephews, our sons, our daughters, the children that we encounter on a regular basis. So it's really important to understand some of the dynamics of the recruitment. And when they use the word kidnap, it often is luring, not necessarily going into someone's home and taking them from their bedroom or kidnapping them off a playground. That's where we see those myths that can be very destructive, because if a child voluntarily goes with a trafficker, we question, well, was it a crime? You know, did they voluntarily went? They chose to do this. That's not the case. They're under the age of 18. So the word kidnap is used to describe the luring, when the child actually goes from one place to another with the trafficker, because they've been enticed. Next slide, please. Now, this is also really exciting. Two things. One is, we know we have to stop the buyers. We can't just stop human trafficking by identifying victims. We have to be able to stop the buyers. That's the basis. If there's no buyers, then there's no business. So in 2019, we made 230 arrests or issued citations. These are misdemeanors. These are people that are trying to buy sex with an adult. In 2020, we issued 336. Again, it was a unique year, so we had some challenges with our commitment to addressing the buyers. Now, this is really exciting. On March 10th, we started an online project, and as a result, we placed 13 ads. We now have a list of 1,242 buyers specifically looking for juveniles. So we've identified them, and they're on our sort of watch list. And of those, we made 50 felony arrests, meaning that individuals physically went out to go meet with the girl that they identified online that they were going to have sex with that night. So we are continuing to do those efforts. And again, with COVID, we had to change some of the ways we do things. We're not out on the streets as much. Some of the areas were not as busy. So we moved on to an online platform, like many other entities, and we're having great success. So we are attacking the buyers, and we're looking particularly for those that are trying to buy sex with a minor. Next slide, please. We also have to recognize that a lot of times it's not just about sex trafficking, but they can be lured through labor trafficking. They're going to babysit. They're going to work in a store, and then they become obligated to have sex with the employer, things like that. So these are all things that we have to consider when we're talking about human trafficking. We have to include both sex and labor, because our youth are very, very vulnerable to both sex and labor trafficking. And one can lead to the other. We often see a co-occurrence. Next slide. So you've been given some really important information, and that's what this evening is about. You can have all the information in the world. Now you have to do something with it. And this link here takes you to the Polaris Project, or you can just Google Polaris North Star Pledge. And when you sign on to that pledge on the Polaris website, it will not only register you as someone supporting the efforts to combat human trafficking, but you'll also be able to get emails and updates about legislative issues, about what's happening in your own state. They do a state-by-state legislative analysis. And as a result of that, we are working very hard in our state to address some of the gaps that have been identified. And currently, we have on the books, on our legislation, by 2022, we have to have mechanisms in place to house the youth, to be able to provide the mental health and the medical services that they need in a safe environment, decriminalizing them. So there's some things that have to be worked out. We have to have those safe and secure facilities, but we absolutely are moving in that direction. We're doing an analysis of what we have, what we need, how we're going to fund it, how we're going to support it. We're looking at models around the country. Next slide. This is the human trafficking hotline. And I know that my time is really limited, so I just want to put this up. This PowerPoint can be sent out to people because it does have some resource material in it. So please feel free to share it. Last slide. This is my contact information. You are more than welcome to call me at any time. Also, we do have a robust email list, and if you want to sign up, we let you know of upcoming events. We let you know of legislative issues, things like that. And the last piece of that is that we have not been able to hold our quarterly meetings, which usually we have about 125 people from the community come out. We do some education. So at the end of the month, we are going to be rolling out a 90-minute session online, and I will get you the link to that. We're just finalizing the date and the time and everything. And I want to make sure that you have access to it. Sign up. We can take up to 100 people. If we max out, we're going to redo it. And it's basically a training that will sort of update you about what's going on in the community. And it gives people an opportunity to understand a little bit more. Particularly, we have to be aware of co-occurring sex and labor trafficking, because we often forget that piece. And with that, I thank you so much for having me this evening. And I hope that you will take advantage of my phone number or joining our email list as well. And I encourage you to take action.
Are you allowing questions?
We will do questions at the end.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lynn. Cosette Gary is trust and estate and family law attorney in Los Angeles. She is committed to the community and has served in numerous leadership positions, including the board of trustees of the Westchester Rotary Foundation and Selective Service Board in the LA region. In 2017, when Cosette was the district governor for District 5280 in the Los Angeles area, she established a task force to explore how to fight human trafficking. As part of this initiative, the task force launched the website, Rotarians Fighting Human Trafficking, which is a resource for educating the community about human trafficking. Recently, Cosette was instrumental in establishing a new type of Rotary Club, a cause-oriented one, and whose sole mission is to fight human trafficking. So let's welcome Cosette Vergari.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me this evening, and hello, everyone from Los Angeles. We are neighbors. Our Rotary districts are next door neighbors. And Lynn, I really want to thank you very much for what you do, and I will be reaching out to you. I took your phone number and try to have a chat with you, and we can talk about that later, but thank you so much for the work you are doing. This is a long journey for me. I'm not going to share my whole life's journey on this issue, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it. And as Lynn said, we haven't been able, statistics really can't show the total picture because we aren't always able to identify the victims of labor and sex trafficking. But sex trafficking is on the path to becoming the most lucrative criminal activity worldwide, surpassing that of drug trafficking. The reason? Because a sex trafficker can sell his product, usually a minor child, over and over and over. Many people believe this to be an issue somewhere else in the world, and it is. But what many do not realize is that it is an issue right in our own neighborhoods. Says the US State Department, and I quote, "Dollar for dollar, human trafficking in America is far worse than it is overseas. It is an underground epidemic that is growing exponentially and is happening in our own backyards." The US State Department posts the following statistics for America. And Michael, please advance to the next slide. Thank you. 96% of traffic victims in the US are females. 82% of traffic victims in the US are trafficked for sex. Generally the rest for labor. And as Elaine mentioned, sometimes there is definitely a crossover. The 3 states with the most human trafficking activity are Texas, New York, and California. California Against Slavery reported San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego are 3 of the 10 worst child sex trafficking regions in the entire country. Victims are transported between Los Angeles and Las Vegas and many other cities in the Northwest. Vegas is also a very high intensity region for sex trafficking. It is estimated that 150,000 victims are currently held as commercial sex slaves in the United States. 50% of the traffic victims are minor children with an average age of just 12 years old and being purchased for sex an average of 5 times per day. If they try to resist or escape, they are threatened, beaten, or drugged into submission. Psychologically, they are pressured. I once heard a survivor speak, whom as she reached her teens was trafficked 7 times per day and usually slept only 4 or 5 hours each day. The average life expectancy of that child that is trafficked is just 7 years. The causes of death usually resulting from either a beating, drug overdose, or suicide. A child sold for commercial sexual exploitation, sold again and again daily for the financial gain of the trafficker of anywhere up to $150,000 per year per child. And you ask yourself, how does this happen? 70% of children are lured into commercial sexual exploitation by their perpetrators are from the most vulnerable population. Those children who are already victims of neglect, domestic violence, or sexual abuse by a family member or extended family members. These children are often runaways who are met at the bus center downtown by the pimps as they step off the bus in a strange, overwhelming city and are promised that they will be taken care of. The pimp will tell them that they have a place for them to stay, that they will be fed and they will be safe, but they don't realize what that is going to cost them. Part of this 70% are children who are recruited out of foster care by a foster sibling even, who has already been taken into the life of commercial sexual exploitation. And even worse, some children are sold into sex trafficking by their own parents or family members. Recently, I met with the founder of a nonprofit in the Los Angeles region working with survivors. She told me the story of a 10-year-old girl she is working with right now. The mother of the girl was an addict. The courts awarded custody of their 5-year-old daughter to the father. It was later discovered that from the tender age of 5 until this child was 8 years old, her own father trafficked her for sex. You may think to yourself or say to yourself, thankfully, that could never happen to my child or my grandchild. But what about the 30% of the children who are trafficked that I haven't talked about? I've spoken of only 70% of those children who are trafficked. The other 30% come from intact families, like your family, my family, and through the internet, the dark net, and social media, become victims. Earlier this year, I met and heard a survivor tell her story. She came from a well-educated family with great parental support. This young woman was a strong student through high school and college and was an MBA candidate at Cal State Northridge in the Los Angeles area when she met a young man online. Very cautiously, she pursued getting to know him, and only online. She did not agree to meet him for dinner or social interaction until after about 2 months of communicating online and through social media. They finally met for dinner and a relationship began, but it was not the relationship she expected. She did not realize that the very first connection with him was the beginning of a grooming period. Within a few more months, he was trafficking her for sex using the same tactics of coercion and intimidation through emotional and physical abuse. And now, Michael, you may move on. Thank you. So my journey on this issue, it is something that has bothered me, made me angry for many years. It, in fact, led me to law school. And I was motivated to attend law school when, at the time, Los Angeles District Attorney Gil Garcetti established the Domestic Violence and Sex Abuse Crimes Divisions to prosecute these perpetrators. When I graduated from law school, I externed for a federal court magistrate, which was also the time that I coincidentally joined Rotary, now just over 25 years ago. The two worlds for me really came together in 2015 when I attended the Rotary International Peace Conference and followed the track of speakers on the issue of child sex trafficking. From there, I returned back home and partnered Rotary District 5280 with Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, chairing a forum to raise awareness in collaboration with nonprofits, all levels of law enforcement, from Homeland Security to FBI to the Los Angeles Police Department and the several other police departments in the cities of the County of Los Angeles, as well as the county sheriff. During my year as Rotary International District Governor for the Los Angeles region, and having the support of Michael Turner, who has invited me tonight to participate as he served in the role of Senior Assistant Governor for Communications for me in 2017-18. I had the platform to bring even greater attention to this issue. In 2018, I launched the website that you see on your screen, RotariansFightingHumanTrafficking.org. Please write this down. Michael can share this link with you as well, but please explore the website. And this is where, Elin, I would love to connect with you. I initially started, my focus was Los Angeles region, and it has expanded, now working very closely with San Diego and Sacramento and other regions that are in conversation right now. And the website is a collaboration. It has grown beyond my expectations in the beginning, continues to grow daily. It's a collaboration between Rotarians, government agencies, and nonprofits who are rescuing and assisting victims who have been trafficked for sex or labor or both. I'm excited to announce that 21 nonprofit organizations serving this cause have joined us on the website as a partner. Also joining so far as partners are 22 Rotary clubs, and I certainly invite your club to join us in partnership. We are working, we have had the districts of Sacramento and San Diego, as I mentioned, for Rotary join us, as well as the worldwide organization Rotary Action Group Against Slavery. In October of 2020, I was responsible for the chartering of a new cause-based Rotary Club in the Los Angeles region, as Michael mentioned. It's focused strictly on the issue of human trafficking, bringing together, once again, nonprofits, governmental programs, and individuals who are interested in this issue. The new cause-based Rotary Club was required to have 20 members to charter. My incoming governor at the time, last May, approached me and asked me if I would take on this task. And we set a goal for March of this year. And in reality, we chartered with 24 on October 15th of 2020. And we now have 32 members with 6 in the queue who are waiting for orientations to join. And my focus here was to bring the people who are boots on the ground day to day, working with the victims, the survivors, and the programs that are out there to assist them to get out of the life. So we have successfully brought in a third of our membership are nonprofits and governmental programs represented by individuals from these programs and nonprofits as members of the new club. So that, as you all know, in Rotary, the model is not to go out and tell the community what they need. We need to ask the community what is needed. So that has been the focus, and I spend almost full time right now getting this all up and running, but we are so lucky to have such a phenomenal group of people with amazing talents and experience who are focused on this issue. And so finally, what can you do? What can you do to make a difference? There are things being offered to you tonight, ways to connect, ways to educate yourself, but I encourage you to come join the fight and make a difference. And thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you very much, Cosette. Kimberly Mull is a child sex trafficking survivor. She turned policy expert and a victim's right advocate. With more than a decade of experience, Kimberly utilizes her work with victims of violence against women, which includes over 400 sex trafficking victims, to influence policymakers and legislators in creating trauma-informed, victim-focused policies. She has helped write, sponsor, and advocate for more than 100 laws on human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and victims' rights across the country. Please welcome Kimberly Mull.
Hello. Right on cue. Oh, am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I see you, Lynn, nodding, and right then my computer starts going, "You're running low on battery." I apologize. Give me just a second. Of course, it's right when I get on the computer. I'm sorry if I'm a little out of it. I've actually been sick for the last 24 hours. It's not COVID, don't worry. But so I'm a little bit in a daze because today is International Human Trafficking Awareness Day. So I've had meetings and presentations like this since about 6 a.m. on top of being sick. So it's been a very long day. I want to thank you all for having me. I'm very excited to be here and be talking with you about this. As Michael said, I am a survivor of child sex trafficking. My victimization started when I was 11, and it is very much different from what most people typically believe to be what trafficking looks like. And I know we discussed that a little bit today, but we're gonna go a little bit more in detail about that. So we have our chat here. And so if you could put in the chat, when you think of human trafficking, if you can name a movie related to human trafficking, can you type in the chat what movie you think of when you think of human trafficking for me? Just in the chat, just anybody, just name a movie that you think of. Taxi Driver, Midnight Cowboy. Okay, I've never gotten these answers. Okay. Gotten 2 people. There's 36 on this call. I know some other people can throw some movies out there. Taken, thank you, Ellen. So Ellen knows which one I'm looking for. So 95 to 99% of the time, when someone's thinking about a movie related to trafficking, most of the time what we hear when we're in this work is the movie Taken. And if you're not familiar with the movie Taken, it's got Liam Neeson in it, and his daughter is essentially physically kidnapped, and he's on this huge rescue mission and to find her and rescue her. And that's a lot of times what people associate with trafficking, especially when it comes to child trafficking. They think of the word kidnapping, right? And taken. And what I try to explain to people is I was 11 and I was taken, but I was home for dinner every night. And that's something that's really hard for people to understand, because they can't associate how a white middle-class child from a good family, Christian values, law enforcement father in Texas could have been victimized through one of the earliest forms of social media, which at the time was AOL and AOL chat, and essentially turned into a prop for men from her community and outside her community to use for their own personal pleasure without really anyone in my family, my teachers, my school, my church ever realizing what was happening. And it's a very scary thought for people to understand or even comprehend. And so what I try to do now is educate people on what trafficking really looks like in the United States, because it's not the movie Taken, and it's not what most people associated. I just saw someone just typed in the Jeffrey Epstein documentary, and that's a good example. So the Jeffrey Epstein documentary has this whole narrative. It was happening the same time I was going through my situation, same time frame, a lot of times the same type of people. The only difference was my abuse wasn't happening on a private island. I was in the house next door. And that's, again, hard for people to understand. So what I do now is try to educate people on what it really looks like for victims and survivors, and what, as a community member, you can do to help not only help with awareness, but prevention, intervention, and aftercare for survivors. And so Michael asked me to talk about, really what is needed and what you as individuals can do. And so I really came down to 3 things that I really hope that you can take away from this. And number 1 is to understand that we as society, for about the last 20 years now, have really been working on trying to get people to understand what human trafficking is and trying to get people bought into this idea. And it started with the Trafficking Prevention Act and 2000, and it's really gone on since then. And really trying to get people bought into this idea. And a lot of times, though, what we hear are people and entities and organizations saying, you know, we're trying to speak for those who have no voice, or we're trying to help bring people out of the darkness, or we are trying to, you know, speak for the silence. And as a survivor leader in this country, what we're trying to do, and there are thousands of survivor leaders in this country, and many of us doing this work. What we're trying to really do, and really trying to now steer the conversation towards, is saying we are not silent, we are not voiceless, we are not in the dark, and we appreciate you trying to help, and we want your help, but we need people to pass the mic to us and pass the mic to those with lived experiences, so that we can really lead the movement. Just like if you were going to help with a campaign towards African American women in need, right? You would expect the campaign to be led by African American women. And not men, and not Caucasian women. We've learned now in society that, you know, no, we need to let those with lived experience lead the movement. And we need to help and offer support and bring what we have, our experiences of helping that population, to assist with that. And so what we're trying to do as survivor leaders in this country is to say, that's great. And we want your help and assistance, but please quit talking about us in the distance third person. Start understanding we are individuals, we are leaders, especially here in Southern Nevada and the Southern California. There are tons and tons of survivor leaders who are strong advocates and in doing this work, and some not doing this work that are still strong advocates and voice of their experiences. And we're here to, you know, to help and to lead in the movement, and really want to make sure that people understand. I've unmuted myself. Is that okay, Michael? I didn't know if my rant was going and you were like, cut her off, or if it would not be the first time. I do advocate at the legislature here in Nevada and around the country, and I've more than once had my mic turned off. So it would
That
not
was
be
an accident.
that has happened. But essentially to say is that survivor leaders are here. We're in this community. We're in Southern California as well. And we are at the helm and ready to help lead this movement, lead these efforts. And we ask that you as allies recognize that, and to make sure that we are not only involved, but not used as a token or given a token position, but really, given the ability to have our voices heard and our experiences used. The next part would be make sure that those that are doing this work or that are trying to bring this message to our communities about awareness campaigns use real images and real stories. And as Michael said earlier, a lot of times we use these images of, young girls who have their mouths duct taped, their hands tied, their dirty hair, they're in a basement. And that's not what trafficking, even child trafficking, looks like 99% of the time. And that's harmful in multiple ways. One, it's harmful in the fact that it keeps you as a citizen and a community member from looking and being able to notice things and to see real victims, because while you're looking for the child trapped in a basement with the dirty hair, you're not noticing the the girl in your daughter's ballet class who's being abused by her father, or the young boy on your grandson's soccer team who's being sold by his next door neighbor. And so you have to be aware that the images that have been widely used the last 20 years, we're really trying to steer away from, because it keeps people from, like yourself, really being able to recognize what real victims look like. One, and two, it keeps victims like myself from realizing we're a victim. I, for a long time, didn't realize I was a victim of trafficking. I knew I was a victim of child abuse, but I didn't realize it was trafficking, because I didn't have dirty hair. I wasn't kidnapped. I wasn't in a basement. No one had taken me. And so I didn't think that I was a victim of trafficking. I thought I was just a victim of child abuse. And it really took a long time for me to even starting doing this work. I was like you, saying, I'm passionate about this subject and I have a passion about it. But really wasn't, I would tell people a lot of times I was almost trafficked, because I thought, these things that happened to me, but I wasn't taken, therefore I wasn't a victim. And it took a lot of time for me to grow in this, to learn, oh wait, this whole idea of transportation has to happen. I've heard that word thrown out a couple times. They're transported across state lines or transported across town. I was transported to the house next door. Like, there doesn't have to be this huge distance taken. There doesn't have to be this huge this huge road traveled. There's not actually, when you're under 18, there has to be no transportation involved whatsoever, because a lot of times, unfortunately, as was mentioned earlier, the sadly, in my experience, the majority of time from people that I know and survivors, it is a family member. It is, or someone related close to the family that is trafficking the child. If they're not in foster care or something to that extent, if they're still in the home, it is a family member, or a close family friend. So there is no need for transportation. It is solely the act itself that makes it fall under the trafficking guidelines. And that also relates to the facts versus the accepted myths. And when I say that, I say we have all these numbers. Ellen mentioned about, we have numbers, but really we don't have numbers in this work. And we have lots of things thrown out there, and I'm just as guilty of it. And the more I've gotten into academics, and I've got my master's degree and more academic side of it, the more I've really started to understand how poorly we've done as society with using statistics and numbers with this subject matter. Because what we do is we say the average age of a girl being trafficked or entering prostitution is 12 to 14 years of age. And that's thrown out there a ton. And I was always like, okay, that sounds great, because that's the age I was 11. I fall right around there, right? Well, the reality is, if you trace that back to the very, 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 very first time it was ever mentioned and ever brought up, it's someone that just kind of comes up with it out of thin air and has no scientific stats or data to back it up. And so once we actually start looking at real research and real numbers and real studies, like with Metro's numbers, the average age was 16. We really start seeing that it really is different from what these myths are put out there. Another common one, unfortunately, I know Cosette used it, was the average life expectancy is 7 years after you're brought into this life. And that's, again, another one that if you take it back to the very, 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 very first time it was ever used, you'll find that it's not an academic source, and how that number kind of came about. And it's not 100% or even really close to that accurate. And so what we really want to do is make sure we use facts, and we steer away from the accepted myths that are quoted by a lot of times genuinely organizations that have a genuine interest and really want to help and think they're helping, but are using less than scientifically methodized numbers with this, because again, we want people looking for the actual instances, and we don't want anything that's going to dissuade or change the narrative from real stories, because it's harder for people to recognize a real victim, and it's harder for victims to really recognize themselves and to come to that real self-acknowledgement, and that also that place they need to be to ask for help and assistance. And finally, the third and last point, and I'll jump off because I know we're running out of time, would be how important state elections matter when it comes to this topic. We have federal legislation at work on. I'm actually working on a couple federal legislation things right now with a couple senators and Congress people, and then also some other federal things. But really, when it comes down to it, most of the time, we also really need state officials that are not only passionate, but also educated on the subject matter of child trafficking. Because what we do is we have, like here in Nevada, where we have this issue where we have an assembly judiciary committee that a lot of times is highly stacked with defense attorneys. And so we'll bring a bill forward, or the attorney general will bring a bill forward saying, we want to make sure anyone that buys a child under the age of 18 is held accountable, for buying sex with a child. And then we have defense attorneys who are elected in office that are like, but do we really know that they bought a child? And then you have poor Lynn who's over there trying to say, well, they answered an ad saying, this is to buy a 14-year-old. And then you have the defense attorney that's been elected going, but did they really buy a 14-year-old? So should they really be held accountable? So state laws really matter in this case. And we really want to make sure we elect officials and we educate officials, and we create campaigns to educate officials on a state level to make sure we have strong policy in place, and that we have strong efforts to get legislation that holds people accountable, but also makes it, I can't say impossible, but makes it beneficial for those who are elected to serve in the children's interest. I'll put it that way. And we can do that by having campaigns or having Rotary groups do outreach, or having, generate email campaigns, or bringing people on board from our business and our network saying, hey, we need to all reach out to this specific legislator or these specific legislators and say, we need to support children. If you buy sex from a child, no matter if that child's your next door neighbor or, one from quote unquote the wrong side of the tracks, you should be held accountable. If you're buying sex from a child, you should go to jail and you shouldn't be given a ticket, which is a lot of times, unfortunately, kind of what happens in our society. So those are the things I hope you get from this. I know it was kind of a brief rundown. I'm talking very fast, but I'm always here. I am a Rotarian. I am always here. If you have questions, I do speaking engagements and things like this for a living. So if you do have anything, you can always visit my website, KimberlyMole.com or sextraffickingspeaker.com. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have here or after this. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm going to open it up now for questions. So people have questions for either Kimberly, Lynn, or Cosette. This is the time to ask those questions.
Hey, Mike, this is Dave Paget. I hopped on a little bit late. Is that PowerPoint presentation, the first one, going to be available? Is that something we can get our hands on so I can see some of the earlier slides?
Yeah, I can upload that. And also this video is going to be on our YouTube channel.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. Great job.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Cindy.
Hi, my name is Cindy. Claremont Sunrise Rotary. I'm in LA County. Kimberly, can you elaborate a little bit on what we're missing? And I understand that you're saying it's the kid in the ballet class and that kind of stuff, but can you give me some more specifics? Because honestly, my vision was a truckload of kids being driven up and down the 10 freeway, because I understand that the 10 freeway is a thoroughfare for some sex trafficking. So I just don't understand or need more education on what I'm looking for.
Yeah, so realistically, the 10 freeway is going to be more like labor trafficking and individuals that are we call them FAMs when we're in the life. So it's like I'm with 4 other girls that we all have the same pimp, and we're going up and down the highway working a track. So from LA to San Diego to Las Vegas, and we just kind of make this route, right, where we're working different areas. So it keeps us from getting say caught or interacting with law enforcement so often. So the reality with kids is just to be aware of the children that are around you. The odds of you noticing a child that you have no relationship with or you have no real interaction with and being able to say, oh, I bet they're being sex trafficked. The odds of that really happening are a lot lower than you recognizing children in your own circle that are being trafficked. Now, if you work in or work with children who are from highly marginalized populations or highly at-risk populations, such as homelessness or after-school programs, specifically from children from impoverished schools, things like that, that are going to have less interaction from adults in their own circle, if that makes sense. Then you would learn more things like, an 11-year-old that's showing highly sexualized hyperactivity, sexual behavior, right? That's inappropriate. There's probably something to that. Now, whether it's sex trafficking or just sexual abuse in the home, that's where there are some differences there. And that's really going to be more law enforcement figuring that out. And so it might be something Elaine could elaborate on what they find in the work that I've done. It's so common, and this is a scary part for people. It's so common that you've seen it, you've known it. I don't care if your kid's in the most elite private school in your area of the country, there's sex trafficking going in that high school. And they might not be, doing low-end street work, but they might be doing off social media, thinking they're being a quote unquote sugar baby for somebody. And the reality is that's still trafficking. There's still a commercial exchange for sex with a minor. And so I did one presentation for a group here in Vegas about a couple months ago, and it's more affluent families, and it's like National Charity Register or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of it, but they do a lot of charity work between the moms and the daughters. These are all senior girls. This group of about 20, 25 senior girls in high school all go to some of the best schools here in Las Vegas. And I'm trying to explain how often these girls are going to encounter this, especially when they hit this senior level in high school and when they go to college. And one of the moms asked pretty much the same question you asked me just now. And she's like, well, how do we know if our child's been approached by someone? And I'm like, well, do they have a phone? Because if they have a phone and they're a girl, they probably have been. And the mother just looked at me. She goes, well, surely that can't be right. And the speaker looks around. She goes, raise your hand if you've been approached by a man on any social media on your phone, asking you to be your sugar daddy or to pay to have sex with you, whatever. All 25 girls raise their hand, every single one of them here in Vegas. And so it's something that parents, it's one of those things you just have that conversation with your kids, because social media is so overbearing in our lives now, and just such a part of it. I guarantee you, I could start a profile on my phone for, say, TikTok or really any kind of program, and put myself as a 14, 15-year-old girl with some cute pictures. And I guarantee you within 12 to 18 hours, I will be approached by an adult man, 100%. And they'll come to me. I won't have to do any outreach, 100%. And it's just the way our society has become on social media. So you have to make sure as parents there's those controls on the phone, or that your child's educated and that they're aware on what's coming at them and prepared to handle that and to come to you and to to other safe places to explore that. So I don't know if Lynn wants to go off on anything that she's seen or completely, dismiss everything I've just said.
No, I just wanted to add one thing. One of the things that we found that really worked here in our community is we did education programs. In fact, the folks that made those videos that you saw earlier today participated. We did programs for the middle school and the high school students. And then we repeated the program in the evening for the parents with a little bit more information. And the purpose of that was to start conversations at home. So what we found as a result of that was we had 3 females, young girls in our middle school and high school that were approached at one of our local gyms here in Las Vegas. And all 3 of them, same gym, same profile that was approaching them. The girls were not together, but each of them went home and told their parents, as opposed to buying into, you look like a model. I think that, I could help you with your career, that kind of thing, which is very exciting to a 15-year-old. So it's being able to open those conversations, exactly what Kimberly was saying about how do they bring that information home and not get sucked into it, so to speak. It's making sure that the parents have the same information that the kids have about the red flags and what's going on, and then being able to have those conversations, and they are really hard ones to have with your kids.
And Cindy, I think you were the one who initially asked this question. Speaking of education, California, I'm not sure what Nevada's laws are, but effective January 1 of last year, because Cindy, you're the one that's out in Claremont, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're in their district, but you're next door to me. So in California, effective January 1 of 2020, curriculum addressing this issue is mandated 4th through 12th grade. And so you may want to even explore what your school, the schools in your area are doing with this. In terms of the curriculum, then COVID, of course, hit and layered the schools with so much challenge, including parents as well. And this is during this particular time when children are now so isolated with their devices, it's even scarier that, they're even more vulnerable in this situation. But I would check with your schools in your area to see what they're doing in terms of establishing this kind of outreach to students, faculty, and parents.
Thank you.
And for schools, I believe in California, at one point, it might have changed to 4th. It was 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th grades were required to have the curriculum in their classrooms. Utah has the same. Nevada, my bill this session was going to be that, but it would cost money, and we're essentially nothing with money is going to pass out of our legislature this year. So next session, that will be hopefully my bill. But it is something that, just making sure education is a priority, not only because we want them, we want parents to have the conversations, but because it is most likely, for a lot of times, unfortunately, that the family or someone within the home or close to the home is the one, abusing the kids or that is trafficking the kids. We will make sure those children get that education as well, so that they know, hey, this isn't right. I should be able to talk to someone. I should be able to go somewhere. And as I've told some other people in the past, if I would have had someone when I was in school, when I was 11, 12, 13, 14, telling me, hey, it's okay to tell someone that this is happening to you. You're not going to be taken away from your parents. Because I was threatened all the time. You're a prostitute. You're going to go to jail. They're going to take you away from your parents. Your parents are going to go to jail. All these different things. And to have that education of, no, that's not what's happening. That's not that's not the truth. You're not the bad guy. You're not the one that's in trouble. To have that education would have helped me be able to come forward sooner and to not feel like I was the criminal, because that's what I was being told.
Thank you, Kimberly. Any other final questions for
I have a-
Lynn or
I have a
Cosette?
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Diane?
When I've been in the airports, they have the stickers on the back of the women's bathroom doors, and it gives a number to call and whatnot. And I was just wondering, how effective has that been? And do the victims actually reach out and call those numbers? I was just curious to see how that works.
It actually works in real time. So what happens is when a call goes through to the national hotline, it can go in one of two ways. If a victim identifies that they would like to talk with law enforcement, or a lot of times it's someone who just left the life or is trying to get away from it, and they're now reporting that there's other victims still there, it will go to law enforcement. And if they say that they want help, but they don't want law enforcement, it goes to our service providers and bypasses law enforcement. So that we want to make sure that victims are safe and get what they need. So we work with our national hotline. What it also does, and when we see large numbers of people calling the hotline, it's not always victims. A lot of times it's people looking for information, just as all of you are when you're asking questions about education programs, etc. So what that means is that the larger numbers mean that the awareness is out there and people are calling the hotline. We have had numerous calls that come into law enforcement as a result of those signs. So we're very, very grateful. We just had one case that we're looking at that's actually co-occurring sex and labor trafficking as a result of the victims calling from those types of signs, not just in the airport. But the other really amazing thing about it, and I walk around taking pictures in the bathroom, haven't been in the airport in a while, but there was a lot of graffiti all over them. Now they're covered with like a plastic. But the graffiti was so amazing. I have photographs of it. I could share it with Michael to share with you all. But the graffiti was be patient, be kind to yourself, you're a good person, things like that. That in and of itself kind of opens doors for victims, because it didn't say ugly things like slut or whore, things that one might think people would end up graffitiing. Instead, it was supportive, beautiful messages. So I'm almost sorry that they've covered it over, but I do have photographs of that, because that's the thing that you need to hear. And that inspires victims to step forward and come out of the shadows, because someone's telling them, you're not damaged, you're okay.
And I'll add to that. So as a national movement, survivor leaders have been working on something similar to that. We would like to see messaging that's more, I guess, more language that we're used to if we're in the life. So things like, are you tired of the life? Do you need away from daddy? Things that we're used to seeing, because a lot of times when we talk to survivors that are finally getting out, a lot of times they don't recognize some of the messaging as speaking to them, because they don't identify as a human trafficking victim, right? They think they chose to be in this life. They think they chose to prostitute or to do these activities. And so we are really trying to gear language that's more victim center focused, with that language of, hey, understanding the language within the lifestyle, so that those that are currently within the lifestyle understand we're speaking to them, and not about other people or people that are forced into it. Because like I said with myself, a lot of times I didn't think I was a victim because I didn't fall under that cliche. And so trying to use that victim first, victim focused language is really important. So with the national movement, what we're trying to do for things like to use in not only airports, but convenience store bathrooms and things like that nationwide, is really gear that language towards those within the lifestyle.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation tonight, our three speakers who talked about and educated us about the issue of child sex trafficking in Southern Nevada and Southern California. As we move forward in developing our campaign called Our Children Are Priceless, we need assistance. First, we'd like to add some Rotarians from California. We already have one from the Pasadena Rotary Club, Ken White, but we want to add some others. And second, we also want to encourage district clubs to invite speakers who can educate their members and the community about child sex trafficking. If you need assistance in identifying speakers, contact me. Third, we would like your guidance in identifying resources we can use in developing the district's campaign. This can include agencies, websites, experts, nonprofit organizations, speakers, and so forth. As we end the webinar, I want to thank members of our committee, Linda Davis, Matt Engel, Rick Ingstrom, Tammy Hance, Kate Mazzarella, Minchell, Kimberly Mall, Glenn Ritt, Neil Roth, Ken White, and Eulalie Young. Tonight's webinar will be posted on our club's YouTube channel. And one other note to end is that Governor Steve Sisolak here in Nevada, he proclaimed January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month in Nevada. So thank you for your interest and participation tonight. Let's work together to fight child sex trafficking in our area and communities. Thank you very much for being involved in this. And again, thank you to Lynn, to Cosette, and to Kimberly for their contributions. Good evening.
And Michael, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.